And we're live. All right. So happy Saturday, everybody. We're here with my friend Steven, who does miniatures. He paints miniatures.
Howdy, everybody.
Everybody, this is Steven. So I'm just waiting for the chat to propagate. Here's everybody. Dragon Ball Arts is first. Hey, Dragon Ball Arts. And Athena says morning. And Joseph says hello. Kermito's here with a good morning. Enchant Mix, Alex, Renee. Everybody's here. Okay, now I can't read them all because there's so many of them. Chompy Mage asks, do you paint minis often?
I do. I've not in a minute, just because of life things. I've got 2 little kids, and work's been crazy in the summer especially. But yeah, it's the only kind of fine art that I've ever found any sort of skill at, and so I love it. It's very relaxing, and I love playing the games that go along with it too.
Oh, that's great. And Bethany is here. She's our mod. And but she's not going to be modding much because she's shipping all the posters. Hey, Bethany. Ricky says, good morning. First time catching the stream. Stinky Feral Rat says, hi, good morning. I'm surprised I woke up this. I'm surprised you woke up this early, too. Let's see. What types of miniatures are they? Ice Shard asks.
Well, I can show you some. I brought a couple examples of some things that I've painted previously. They're all roughly in the kind of 32 millimeter category of miniatures. So kind of Warhammer, roughly. This is a model from a game called Bushido. It's one of my absolute favorite games of all time. It's what's called a skirmish game, which is going to be a competitive war game, but with only, roughly 6 to maybe 12 models per side instead of hundreds.
Wow.
That's what actually kind of all these are from, these skirmish games. I did this dude. This is a Khorne warrior from Age of Sigmar.
Is that Warhammer?
That is, yeah. It's one of the Warhammer games. But he had these cool spikes on his head. I don't know if you can see those. So I painted him like Darth Maul.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's giving me Darth Maul vibes. I love it.
And this is another Warhammer model. This gross dude here. This is a Nurgle character.
Can we see the
Lots
back?
of fun textures and stuff on this guy, and fun,
nice.
like playing with colors. I wasn't trying to be pretty with him. Obviously,
You got some purples in there.
Lots of messy, lots of grimy textures, and lots of rust and corrosion and stuff, which is fun.
Summer DeWeasel asks, where do you get them?
Local game stores are always a great place, supporting local. But online, there's a bunch of online stores. I mean, obviously, you can buy straight from Games Workshop. This is another GW model. Amazon has a lot, but there's lots of smaller online retailers that sell miniatures. And a lot of the companies you can buy directly from their own website as well.
Catnap asks, what's your favorite thing about painting minis?
I like telling the story with them. Here's a kind of a good example of that. This dude, this is from a game called Guild Ball, which we'll be painting some other miniatures from today.
Does he have a roasted chicken on his chest?
Yeah, he's from the Chef's Guild. They're a minor guild attached to the Butcher's Guild. And yeah, so he's got a little roast chicken. And then I did some tattoos on him and stained up his shirt.
That's great.
There's a little tattoo on his arm. And yeah, so I really like telling the story of the models. This is still a work in progress, but
down a little bit.
Down.
Yeah, there
can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. She, I get similar to the Darth Maul thing. I get ideas in my head that are really stupid and are gonna
like a Mexican death mask.
They're gonna be very difficult for me to pull off, and then I have to do them.
Yeah.
So her, I did. If you can see my thumb there for scale, but I decided to give her some sugar skull face paint.
That's cool.
The telling stories with the miniatures is really fun. And then, like I said, I really like playing the games as well. That's probably the order it goes for me is playing the games and then painting, and it's more fun to play it painted This I saw somebody mention in the YouTube comments on the announcement for this a 15 millimeter. This is a 15 millimeter miniature that I did.
Which is like smaller than your thumb.
It's extremely small.
It's like thumbnail size.
Next to Vader or to Maul here, he's a wee fellow. This I believe is the Black Prince of Wales from a board game called Time of Legends: Joan of Arc that I kickstarted many years ago.
Nice.
Just gorgeous little 15 millimeter miniatures.
Now you're being asked how do you paint the details so small, which you're going to show today.
Yeah,
right?
we're gonna kind of go over that, but a lot of it is just honestly patience and taking your time and practice. It's kind of a boring answer, but that's what it all really comes down to.
Another question is, can you sculpt them?
I have dabbled in ZBrush, which is the big kind of 3D sculpting software, but it's not.
That one's really nice.
Yeah, this is a fun little Spanish model. So yeah, no, I can't. It's something that I'd like to try more of later, the sculpting, but that's not my forte. Like I said, I've never really been good at drawing, never been good at painting. For whatever reason, this medium has kind of clicked with me. And I have been doing, I'm 35 now, I've been doing this off and on since I was 11, 12,
Wow.
Somewhere in there.
Dennis is asking if you have a YouTube channel.
I personally do not have a YouTube channel, but I am 1/3 of the co-hosts of the Under Towers podcast, which you can find on YouTube and on everywhere that you listen to podcasts. We're a trio of best friends, been best friends for 25 years, and we're formed a book club last year, and we talk about all sorts of nerdy stuff, but especially pertaining to science fiction and fantasy books.
You've got a fan who says that they love you, Stephen, and their name is Christy B.
I love you too, baby. That's my wife.
Yeah, I know.
That's my wife.
I was trying to hide the punchline on that one. Hey, Jamie Brown is here. Let's see. Someone asked if you 3D print them. Do you have a 3D printer?
I do, and I had to take a break from 3D printing until I build my new office in the garage, just because it was right next to the kids' room in our house. But yes, I have 3D. I have so many boxes of gray resin miniatures in my office right now. Yeah, I was quite obsessed with it for a while. 3D printing is incredible, and when I do build out the new office, I'm going to be upgrading to one of the new 8K printers because the amount of detail that you can get on those is just absolutely insane.
Joyfield is asking, wow, those minis are gorgeous. I love the grass. How do you put it on?
Thank you. Let me see. I've only got the one type. There's a couple different kinds that you can get there. These are what's called tufts. And these are from, can you see that?
Down a little bit. There you go.
These are from Army Painter.
What's the right? There you go. Yeah.
Army Painter, which is a kind of miniatures supply company.
So they're not, you don't paste them down individually. They come in tufts. Like
they're little. Like this is probably two. I think these are two little tufts here. And so I just put some super glue down on the base where I want them to go, and then using some little tweezers, you just take the tufts off of the paper that they come on and just stick them on. There's also static grass, which I've used before. You can find that. That's mostly used, I think, for like train set kind of model building. And it's literally just tiny little amounts of green or whatever color you're going to buy, little tufts of grass, but they're not clumped like this. They're all random. And you put those in like a Tupperware, and you can literally just paint where you want the grass to be on the base with some just Elmer's glue, some PVA glue or whatever kind of. You don't want to use super glue as overkill with this stuff. And then you just take the base and kind of stick it in the Tupperware and shake it around, and the glue will catch all the grass, and you just knock the rest of it off.
That's cool.
again, this is an example of tufts,
Yeah.
not the static grass, but that's another route that you can go.
Jalu Walu asks, "Hi, I'm a beginner miniature painter, and I feel like I'm not getting any better. Do you have any tips?"
Just practice, man. Just practice. That's all. And I know it's.
I know it's one of the thing I always say too.
It's a boring answer. There's no. Hopefully, as we go, maybe we'll find some tips to help you up your game a little bit. But it's just practice. Watch this video. There's so many amazing painters on YouTube. And honestly, when it comes to painting like faces, which is one of the things that intimidates people the most, I watched a boatload of makeup tutorials. Because so many of the things of like contouring the face and lining certain areas apply really well when you're trying to paint something, that's going to be visible from 3 feet away, essentially, on the tabletop.
All right, Book Lover asked, "How did you two meet? In case you haven't answered this already, the details on this are incredible." You want me to answer that one?
Yeah, go for it.
So I met Steven's dad back when I was younger, and then when we moved out to Franklin, Tennessee, we realized we lived near each other, and the three of us kind of got together. That's when I met Steven, and Steven and his dad Ron were the ones who built the Hobbit hole, and we've been friends for 17 years now.
I think I met you in 2009. I was still in college.
Okay.
And then we've just
15 years.
Yeah. Long friendship. Very grateful. Scott's an amazing dude. And I treasure his friendship.
Ditto. All right. Is that a homemade wet palette?
Yeah. So do we want to get kind of, we can talk about,
I'm going to zoom out a little bit.
So let's talk tools here for a minute. Because I think one thing that intimidates a lot of people about miniature painting is the barrier to entry. And it does not have to be as wide a gap as you think, maybe. This is a homemade wet palette. You can buy wet palettes, and I'm not going to pretend like they're not better than this. However, I've been using this exact wet palette for going on 10 years probably. And it's literally
a wet palette keeps your paints wet. That's basically what it's there for, so it won't dry out.
Yes, precisely. And with a little Tupperware like this, and frankly, many of the wet palettes that you can buy have a similar thing. You can put a top on it if you want, if you need to pause for a minute, and you might have to remix something. Some paints might separate a little bit, but for the most part, they're going to stay nice and wet and ready for you when you're ready to go. When I first started painting in 2001, whatever it was, I went to the local Games Workshop store, and the guy told me to literally just go get a glossy tile sample from Home Depot, and that's what I used for a long time, and it worked great, but because it's completely dry, the paint dried very quickly on them, so you kind of had to work really fast and ended up wasting a lot of paint. This helps with that, and it's literally just as shallow a Tupperware as I could find. I've got a bunch of paper towels folded up in the bottom. And then this is just a sheet of a square of parchment paper, like baking parchment paper. It's porous enough to let enough of the moisture come through to keep your paints wet.
And the paper towels are wetted.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
So that way it just keeps it moist, so that keeps it from drying out.
And then as far as brushes go, I just bought these from Amazon. I prefer nice brushes. My favorites aren't made anymore. The Raphael Kolinsky 808s, I think, was what they were. They don't make those anymore, but I've painted with Winsor Newton 7s. Those are great. But just the main thing, length of bristle is the most important thing you're looking at. A lot of people assume that you need the teeny tiniest brush size. I've painted with really tiny ones. In fact, I think this is the smallest one I've ever had, maybe a triple 3. But if you see how busted that is and how blown out those bristles are, the problem is when you get into numbers below just a 0, it's really hard to take care of them enough that they don't just poof out. And at that point, they're useless for doing small detail.
Yeah.
So you can actually do a lot finer detail with just like a 1 or a 0 than you could with anything below a 0, because you can keep the tip finer.
And I'm doing just so you guys know, this is really tiny stuff. So I'm doing my best to zoom in on stuff as he's working on it. So give me a second in between as he's showing you stuff up close.
Let's start with this guy. So but the main point with the brushes discussion is
you can go down just a little bit.
You don't need the absolute fanciest. They'll last you a little bit longer if you take care of them, but you can achieve exactly what you want and need to do with cheaper brushes. You know, thinking about barrier to entry and just getting you painting. This set of brushes that I got was like $10, and Winsor Newton or something is going to be $20 for a brush.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that there's not a drastic quality difference, because there absolutely is, but you know, it's just a trade-off. You still have to take care of them either way.
It looks like you're painting a gray on top of the black.
So this is what I'm doing right now. I primed these models black, and the reason that I did that is there's typically 3 different colors that you can use. That's a gross exaggeration. There's a bunch of companies that make colored primers that are fine. I experimented with them, and I've never really found that much of a use for them. Black is definitely the most beginner friendly of the priming options. I use gray the most, but for today I wanted to show black because, again, it's beginner friendly. It's beginner friendly because if you miss a spot, especially like in a crevice or something, it will probably from, again, 3 feet away on the tabletop just look like a shadow that you either purposefully painted or that the light is giving.
Excuse me 1 second. I just want to make sure that I'm hearing a bird.
So, Scott's checking on a possible bird situation. I like gray primer. It's kind of in the middle. Some people use white primer. White primer is absolutely the most unforgiving of the options, because if you make a mistake, it's pretty glaring, the difference between white and black on a miniature. But it obviously also uses a lot less paint to cover up white than black. But black is beginner friendly, so that's what we're doing. And what I was just doing was essentially just accenting a little bit of things that I wanted underpainted with black. A general rule when it comes to underpainting, there's a lot of things with underpainting that I have not yet to grasp. Like, there's some amazing artists in Spain, I'm blanking on their name, but they do these incredible underpaintings with like blues and greens and purples and yellows and all these things, and then paint over the top of that, and it's unbelievably vibrant. We're not doing anything like that today. But when you have things like metals, so like this dude's axe, this chain coming off of it, he's got a couple little hooks. He's got a hook over here. You want to paint black underneath those. It just makes the metallic paints look better. Similarly, if you were going to be painting gold or bronze, you want to undercoat those brown before you paint the gold or the bronze.
Nice.
And then if anybody caught me doing it over his eyes, I'm going to show you guys how to do eyes, which are probably the most intimidating part, and we'll see if I mess it up. And that's one thing to get out of the way quickly too, is you're going to mess up a whole bunch with miniature painting. You're going to make a boatload of mistakes, but just keep in mind that it's extremely simple to fix.
You just repaint over it.
Paint over it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When it comes to practice, what I do, at least with paintings, is I say give yourself little 90-minute projects where you can experience a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah.
So don't jump into. I'm assuming if you're going to practice, don't jump into something really extremely hard. Do a turtle. Do something that is got maybe 2 or 3 different textures, and work on simpler sculpt.
And honestly,
first
don't do
to-
eyes. Just don't do it. If you undercoat black like this, if you prime black and then you just paint your skin and just don't paint the eyes, just kind of carefully go around it with your brush with the skin tone, it's going to look fine. But I can't help myself with the small details, as we were discussing with the painted miniatures. So can you see me here, Scott?
Just down there you go.
Okay, I got to kind of brace myself for this. The trick, so I underpaint black, and I want to try to leave a black rim around the eyeballs. And I may have to go back and do it over again. I don't like this little hair. What's this?
Yeah, it's sticking
this little hair
We
that's
can
sticking
see
out
it.
here. I'm going to cut that real quick on this fella. Just perform a little surgery on my zero brush here.
I've got this little slider for the focus, and so as he's moving around, I'm trying to focus as best as I can so you guys.
Yeah,
can
I'm going to
see
try
it.
to hold as still as possible when I'm doing this. But for eyes, I end up for these little tiny details. I try to
Little
brace my forearms.
There you go.
And hold it kind of tight like this. And then we're just going to try to pick out his eyeballs really carefully here. And just kind of take it slow. And just kind of find the eyeball. And remember, we can clean up any little excess bits. It's not a big deal.
So he's bracing his hands on the table.
Yep.
He's resting, so that way he's getting some stability. I guess the same way like a sniper has to rest their
Exactly. Yeah.
the gun. I don't know why I thought of a sniper, but
I like
yeah.
it. It's a good metaphor. So while I'm doing this part here, we'll talk about paint consistency. What you're mostly going to be painting with miniatures is acrylic paints. In theory, technically, you can go just buy some acrylic paint from the store, from whatever hobby store you're using.
But liquid it seems to be better.
Well, the biggest thing is that the pigments are different sizes.
Yeah. We're getting asked what game is this from?
This is from one of my absolute favorite games of all time, which is called Guild Ball.
Guild Ball.
It's another skirmish game. It's 6 miniatures per side, and it is fantasy murder soccer is what it is. And it was rather unceremoniously killed by its creators back in 2020, but the community has kept it alive, and they're actually starting to support it again. So right now I'm just kind of cleaning up
The edges.
with black
Yeah.
the edges of these white eyeballs. I want to get a little bit more in that corner maybe.
You're getting a hello from the UK, hello from Indonesia.
Howdy, howdy.
Is there a particular technique that you use or prefer?
I use a bunch of different techniques. What we're going to be looking at today are some basic ones that will get you through anything that you want to do. We're going to be looking at layering. We're going to do a little bit of dry brushing, and we're going to do some washing.
Okay. There's also a blow dryer if you need to dry anything.
I think we're okay.
Okay.
I think that's going to be good. So we're going to start on skin. Now this fella has a Caucasian skin tone, but the really cool thing about this layering technique that we're going to use is that it applies to whatever shade of actual human melanated skin tone that you want to use, or if you're painting an orc and you want to, the kind of classic green orc, or the night elves from Warcraft that have purple skin. It's the exact same technique. And it essentially, with miniature painting, and Scott, I'm not as familiar with kind of fine art painting. With miniature painting, we start with the darkest tone and work our way up to highlights. I remember in college doing a drawing class, and you were kind of doing the reverse, where you're starting with at least this is what our teacher was teaching us, was starting with, lightest and then adding with your pencil.
For watercolors. It's because watercolors are transparent, so you go lights to darks. But like with gouache, it's midtones. You just try to get like the midtones, and then you can come in with the shadows, and then you finish off with the highlights. So it's, but like I think oils might be closer to what you're doing.
Yes.
Bethany would be able to answer that. She does oils.
And there is that's something that I've been wanting to experiment with. There is a corner of the miniature painting community that uses oil paints, and they come up with some just remarkable work.
Yeah.
But it is a completely different medium and requires a lot of different things. What I'm looking for with my consistency of my paint is kind of roughly 2% milk, between 2% milk and whole milk, as far as like the consistency of the paint. Skim milk is too much water.
Yeah.
Just add a little bit of paint back into it.
And you don't want cottage cheese.
Correct. Yeah. That will cover all the details on your model.
Yeah.
We're going to switch over to a bigger brush here because this fella's got a lot of open skin. I'm painting right now with the Pro Acryl line of paints. These are
Over
perhaps
to the left a little bit.
Not the most beginner-friendly
There you
paints. I would recommend if you're just starting out.
You can see that it's very wet. It's very thin.
Yep. 2 thin coats is the mantra of Duncan Rhodes, who used to be one of the painting instructors for Games Workshop. And it's not always true, but it's a good base to start from, because thinner coat is going to dry faster, and it's, again, thinking about all the teeny tiny little details on these models. You don't want to cover those up with layers of paint. So
come up a little bit. There you go.
How's this?
Down a little bit. There you go. It's
all right.
We're so close. Yeah.
I would Games Workshop paints are great. They're not the cheapest, as with everything Games Workshop related. If you're just starting out, I highly recommend Army Painter. I have some of their stuff up here still. This is a wash, but that's Army Painter. That's what when I got seriously back into the hobby, that's what I did. They sell big paint sets that are very relatively inexpensive, and they're very consistent quality of paints.
Aubrey asked, what type of paint do you like Army, Citadel, etc.? I think you just answered.
Yeah. I'm enjoying these Pro Acryl ones. They're very matte. They actually require very little watering down to get to the correct consistency, which is nice. Just a time saver. But I've painted with a lot of them. These are from Monument Hobbies, is who makes the Pro Acryl. Games Workshop is always great. I rarely use their paints anymore, but I do very consistently use their washes, and a lot of their technical paints are really cool. If we have time today, we'll get to at least one of their technical
Aubrey
paints.
says, thank you. You've been so informative about this. This is so fun. I really enjoy watching.
Awesome. Thank you. And
Ray says, hi, Scott. Hi, Stephen. Hi, chat.
Howdy. So we're just kind of taking our time. We're not worrying about, I'm not worried about covering anything up right now, except I don't want to get the eyes.
Yeah, but if you get something on one of the pieces of equipment or whatever, you know that you're going to paint over that.
Well,
next.
And similarly to starting with our darkest color, what I try to do is I always start at the lowest point, not lowest like his feet, but the lowest layer. Skin is usually where I start.
Yeah.
Other people don't do it that way, but that's how I roll.
Sterix asked, what's the name of the figure you're painting?
This is Boar. He's
Boar?
Yep.
Okay.
He's a member of the Butchers Guild from Guild Ball. They're my team. They have been since I started playing. They are my team because they are the least interested in playing soccer and the most interested in just
killing,
just maiming and destroying. They're a glass cannon team, so they're very fast and very hard hitting. Not necessarily the strongest as far as their own defense, and that play style agrees with me. But yeah, this fellow's bore.
Bethany really liked the comparison of whole milk, 2%, and skim milk for the levels of transparency. Fantastic analogy.
Thank you. I wish I could take credit for it, and I also wish that I could give credit to where I heard it the first time. Again, especially when I was starting out, I watched so many videos on YouTube. There's such an incredible community of professional painters. So here's where we're going to just really take our time for a second, because I want to try to leave some of that black around the eyeball. And again, we can always fix it.
Pixel Person asks, do you have a figure you really enjoy working
on? It kind of depends on the mood that I'm in. I gravitate towards the darker stuff, the darker fantasy stuff than Scott does.
Yeah.
But that being said, I have done a little bit of professional work. If anybody's familiar with IV Games, they're a board game company here in Nashville, and I've done some painting for them, some just kind of random stuff, but also did the studio models for their latest Mythic Mischief game, and that was all very like cute fantasy, like little gnomes and fairies and stuff. So very outside of my wheelhouse. Lots of very bright colors, but that was just an absolute joy. Like it was so much. It was so much fun. You know, little pink fairies and gnomes with bright red mushroom hats, and you know, stuff that again is not what I normally do at all, but was just very refreshing in a lot of ways. But I tend to like what I am excited to play, and then kind of figuring out how to, whether I want to paint them, to the studio's imagining, like kind of the normal colors that they have planned out, if I want to keep it kind of canon, or if I want to do it my own way. That's always a fun part of the process.
Aubrey
for me.
asks, how do you work around all the small details without overpainting your bottom layers? How would cleanup lines when you paint over something else on a mini?
Yeah, just honestly, just taking my time. That's the only thing. And I tend to look at a miniature a lot. This is actually the second time that I've painted this exact miniature, so I'm a little bit more familiar with him to begin with. But I always take time to look at them and kind of plot out how I'm gonna paint them, so that I'm not as surprised. But I mean, something always gets messed up, so you just go back and touch it up. You can also, through doing some touch-ups, if you find that you're not getting the separation that you want between layers of things, you can also go back with like a dark wash or an ink, a black ink or something, and kind of very carefully line it out in that recess, and that will give you a little bit of extra separation, which is nice.
Yeah. Oh, we moved out of focus.
But it's mostly just taking our time. Yeah. And
looking great. I would have never known that they had that mustache.
Isn't that fun? This is such a fun part when the first layers start going down and you really start getting to see. Now, one other thing, I'm not going to go too crazy with this bottom layer. I'm going to, especially in the recesses, I'm not going to worry if there's a little bit of black showing through, because a lot of these kind of wide areas are going to get covered up by our next tones. And then any little bit of black that's showing through in these kind of dark recesses, I'm not so worried about, because that's just going to help amplify the shadows. Almost done here with this first layer of skin, and then we'll move on to a different color here.
Alice is asking if you downloaded an STL file to print it out, or how do you get your miniatures to then paint it?
Yeah, so this I have done a lot of those. I've definitely 3D printed a lot of models, and they're just, the quality of those anymore is insane. So those are a lot of fun. This is a resin like a 3D print, but I bought this. This was made by Steamforge Games, who created Guild Ball. I bought this before the company shut it down. They now have all of these models available, not for you to print, but what's called print on demand. Which is kind of like if you were buying from somebody on Etsy or something that had a merchant license for a Patreon or something. You can buy any of these teams for Guild Ball from Steamforge, and it takes a couple of weeks for it to get to you because they're printed, I think, by My Mini Factory maybe, and then sent to you. But they have not released the STLs to just be able to print at home yet. So let's talk real quick while this layer is drying about light source. General rule of thumb is the light is coming from up above. That's where we've got the lamp right now. You know, your miniatures are out on the table. The sun is above you. That's typically where you're going to put your light source. Sometimes you'll have a model that is like holding a lamp or an orb or a torch or something, and if you wanted to get extra fancy, you could also have light coming off of that. But for this guy, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to have the light coming kind of roughly this way.
You actually add a light source to these characters?
Well, I mean, you can take that as far as you want. You can make it a colored light, or you know, if there's a very specific magic source or light source. But for our purposes, it's mostly just for wanting to know where the highlights and shadows are going to go.
Okay.
And so roughly at kind of this angle, and we're not going to be fancy about it only being, you know, one directional. It's going to kind of go all over. So, but that's kind of just a general rule of thumb. We're just going to be looking at it from above. While this skin tone is drying, I want to put some color on his pants. For this team, I've been doing kind of dark gray pants. So I'm going to use this dark neutral gray. I don't want it to be too warm or cool. Just a nice neutral gray to start with.
All right, we got someone says, good to see the boys together again in the Hobbit hole. Hey there, y'all. From Ron Berryessa.
Hey.
And then Christy B says, L says, this show is great, Daddy. I'm so excited for you to teach me how to make models. Kiss, kiss, hug, hug, hug.
I love you, sweetheart.
Jade Anderson says, it looks like you're using a do-it-yourself wet palette. Do you recommend using a do-it-yourself wet palette over one you can buy?
I honestly have never used one that you can just buy because I've been so happy with this one, frankly.
Yeah. And earlier he did talk about what materials he used for it too. If you, when the video's over, you can go back, or you could just, I think, scroll back. Ruth is asking if you sculpt the figures.
I do not.
Yeah,
no.
You purchase these?
I do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a remarkable skill all on its own to be able to sculpt, and to be able to sculpt at this scale. These specifically, these Guild Ball models are what are called heroic scale. I'm trying to think. So if you look at Boar here, and the scale of his body, and you look at the size of his hands versus the size of his head.
Yeah.
And then this one doesn't qualify quite so much. This isn't really historic or a heroic scale. You see the size of his hands versus his head. It's much more realistic.
Less exaggerated.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a little more dynamic, and it's a little more readable from far away. It's kind of the same deal as why Michelangelo sculpted David with bigger hands.
Yeah.
It reads from farther away.
Yeah.
Is the big thing.
Dennis wants to know why Guild Ball was shut down.
How salty of an answer do you want? I'm trying not to be bitter anymore because I don't have the emotional space to be bitter about these things. It was complicated. It was right when the COVID lockdowns were starting, or in full swing. I guess it was like summer of 2020, and they just didn't, for whatever reason, like the direction that the game was going as far as the barrier to entry, because it's a brilliant it's one of the greatest competitive games ever made. As far as the rule set was just absolutely incredible and so much fun. But you could quite easily get your ass handed to you if you didn't know what you were doing, and I don't know. I honestly don't know. None of the reasons that were given were satisfactory at all. But
Can you come up just a little bit?
yeah,
There you go.
they're supporting it again, and who knows? It was one of those things where they always said that there was, the game had a shelf life. They weren't gonna keep making it and keep making new teams for so long that they started repeating themselves or anything like that. But that they would continue to support, tournament packs, and if they needed to do balance upgrades or something. And they just went in a different direction. So, and it did not really work out for them, to be honest. It soured the community a lot. So they got some work to do.
Everybody loves the Gaston mug.
Thank you. That's I was telling Scott, I've got two pieces of. I don't know how true this is, but I think that I've got two pieces of theme park history memorabilia here on the desk with me. That is my brush mug, and that is from Gaston's Tavern at Disney World, and I think that I got that pretty soon after it opened. I don't remember exactly when Gaston's Tavern went, but I think it was 2013 was the first time that I went. And then my water mug, I've got an OG Butterbeer Stein from when Harry Potter World first opened up in Orlando.
Dennis says, thank you, Stephen, for your answer, because this is the first time I'm hearing about this franchise.
It was the best, man. It was my absolute favorite game, and it made a lot of us pretty upset. But the game is still great, regardless, and the models are accessible now. I miss the I say miss. I still have all of my old metal models. I vastly prefer metal miniatures. Ironically, out of everything that I showed you, only one of them is metal.
Tracy's asking, how do you store your miniatures?
That's a great question. For transport and everything, I've got some nice cases that are specifically built for miniatures that have soft foam inside, and little compartments for each of the miniatures to sit in. And then at home, I just try to keep them under cover. When I transition to the new office space, I'm going to get some of the I don't remember the name for them, but IKEA has those lighted glass cabinets, and that's the ideal, is eventually to have them all stored in there. All right, so that's base layer on his pants. And let's start the next layer on his skin. I love painting skin. I know a lot of people get a little intimidated by it, but I enjoy it very much. So this is where we're going to do the most of our layering technique with the skin. We started out with this darker shadow flesh as kind of our shade layer. I'm going to take this tan flesh, which is a little bit lighter. It's a slightly different tone, but it's just kind of a step up. And what I'm going to do on my wet palette is I'm just going to put a drop or two in the paint that I just was using in that darker tone, and I'm going to mix it up, and I'm going to go from there. You can also, a lot of paint companies sell what they kind of call triads. So like 3 color groupings. So you would have like a dark tone, a dark skin tone, a mid skin tone, and a light skin tone. And same with, they offer those with a lot of different colors, with reds, greens, blues, what have you, grays. And you could just go with that, and it would be fine. But this is going to give us just a little bit more depth to the skin tones, and with kind of a painting fairly quickly and wanting to get what I would call like tabletop plus, which is just a little bit better than it needs to be for just playing on the tabletop. Ideally, you're going to have 3 layers on everything. You're going to have a shadow, a mid, and a highlight on just about everything. I like to go a little bit further with the skin and spend a little bit more time, especially on the face, because that's where your eye is going to be drawn to. That's going to be kind of the focal point of your miniature most of the time. So I like to put just a little bit more effort into that. So this is going to be not quite our full mid-tone, but pretty close to it. And so we're going to paint most everything and just kind of leave a lot of the deepest recesses, that darkest color.
I would think the first thing I would focus on would be the big weapon in his hand, but that's just me.
We can do that next.
No, I'm saying if I saw the guy.
Oh, I see.
His
Yeah, in
face
real
would
life,
not
you
be
would.
the first thing I would notice.
So this is where we're gonna start kind of sculpting around his face a little bit, and you want to start kind of thinking about those bones. And at some point, if you guys are interested, we can do a female model as well, because there's some little subtle differences to help kind of differentiate from, again, 3 feet away, thinking about you're standing above a table playing the game.
Yeah. Now, you're going to hear some questions that are going to get asked multiple times because people come in and out.
Sure.
So where do you get the figs?
Various online places. The only place that you're going to be able to find these Guild Ball miniatures that we're painting now are going to be from Steam Forged Games and their website, unless you can find some of the old ones on like eBay or something. Most places are going to be sold out from them at this point because of how long the game was kind of went under. But there's a lot of great online retailers. Noble Knight Games has a lot of great stuff. Miniaturemarket.com. If you happen to live in the St. Louis area, you could go to their brick and mortar store as well.
You go up a little bit.
Yeah. And then also, if you're wanting to just buy Games Workshop miniatures, those you can pretty reliably, you're going to find in any game store.
Okay.
Because in order for a game store to survive, you got to have Magic the Gathering and you got to have Warhammer 40K. If you don't have either of those, your game store is not going to live. But for a lot of these smaller games that I enjoy, they're not going to be found in as many brick and mortar stores. So online is the best option. And it's cool if you can buy directly from the company. But there are a lot of great online retailers that offer some pretty significant discounts too on some things.
Let's see. What is your favorite type of character / figure to paint?
I like big brawny dudes because muscles are fun and muscles make painting skin easier because you're just kind of tracing muscles. I like models that have a lot of character built into them. That one I showed at the very beginning, that Nurgle Knight that has all the grimy, nasty components, that's always fun. Anything that gives me an excuse to do a little bit more storytelling with my paint job, as far as really being able to see who this character is. I enjoy to an extent like army scale painting, where you're painting a lot of dudes exactly the same. But frankly, that gets a little boring. The kind of batch painting like that, I much prefer. That's one reason that I like these kind of skirmish scale games where, especially with something like Guild Ball, I can have an entire team with just 6 models. I don't have to have every other model that's available for the team because only 6 can play at a time. So I can really spend time on getting those 6 models to look how I want them to look.
So Coral Creates asks, if I remember correctly, the Warhammer stuff is crazy expensive, right?
It's pretty crazy expensive, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. There's no getting around it.
There's
You can get discounts. A lot of online retailers will sell them for like 10% off or something, 20% off sometimes. But the truth is,
there's no like entry sets or anything like that.
There are, but they're still expensive. Yeah, you kind of it's kind of like Magic, where if you're going to be serious about it, you're going to spend some money on it.
Someone says you're painting Scaventide.
Scaventide? No, I honestly haven't been doing much Warhammer stuff. I played some Age of Sigmar when 2nd edition came out. I just don't have the time, to be honest. I love the models. I've always loved Games Workshop models, and I have a bunch of their Lord of the Rings stuff. If anything, that's going to be the thing that I will be playing from Games Workshop. That's what started me off in the hobby, was when Lord of the Rings first got created with the movies, they've revived that as well. So I am looking forward to that, but it's a time issue, and it's a commitment. And it's why, like, I love the lore and the world of Warhammer 40K. It ticks all the boxes for me, but I just don't have the time commitment for it. And I also like playing too many other games. And you kind of, if you're going to be serious about something like 40K, that's kind of your game.
It's all or nothing.
Yeah, that's an exaggeration. But when you're a dad, and
yeah,
you got other commitments, it is kind of does become an all or nothing sort of thing.
Ruth is asking, what is your favorite art shortcut, if you have any?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, we'll touch on it at some point here. Washing can be a great shortcut. Using washes, especially Agrax Earthshade, is one that Games Workshop makes. This from their Citadel paint line, and we kind of that's like a brown wash, and they also have a black wash called Nuln Oil, and those are sometimes lovingly referred to as liquid talent, because you spread that on an area and it makes it look like you did way more work than you actually did. So that would be kind of a shortcut, but I don't know, a lot of the things, like those little detaily things that I like to do, there's kind of not really a shortcut around them. Yeah. And I get the idea in my head, and I don't have a choice at that point. I just have to do it. So I don't honestly know. It's a great question, and I mean, there certainly are shortcuts. If you're doing a larger scale thing, if you're doing an army where you're going to have an entire unit of models painted the same way, you're not going to do what I'm doing here and just spend all this time. You're going to do what's called batch painting, where you're going to have all your guys lined up. You're going to do 10 or more at a time, and you're going to paint one color on all of them, and you're going to paint the next color on all of them.
Yeah.
And you're going to get, that's where you would do, like a mid-tone instead of starting at your darkest tone, and then slap a wash on that, do some highlights with some dry brushing, and then call it a day, because you've got freaking 100 miniatures to paint, and you can't afford to spend the amount of time that we're putting into this.
All right, Yokio Blast asks, if you had to pick a chaos god, which would you choose?
Khorne, for sure, 100%. Zero hesitation, it's Khorne. Blood for the Blood God, Skull for the Skull Throne. The only Age of Sigmar army that I have is a Blades of Khorne army. Yeah, no doubt. Always Khorne.
That was all Greek to me, but I'll assume it has to do with the game.
Yes, yeah. So in the Warhammer universe, I guess there's technically 5 Chaos Gods, because Skaven is its own chaos thing now. But there's Nurgle, the god of pestilence and disease. There's Slanesh, the god of pleasure and pain. There's Tzeentch, the god of change, and Khorne, which is the blood god. And he's just all about killing and wrecking stuff.
Sounds like Crom.
So, yeah, for 100%, that's absolutely where a lot of inspiration came from. So, you can see now we're starting to build up our layers here. If we look underneath, you can see where some things that I didn't even touch were, because, again, looking at it from top down.
Do you want to talk about the thing that's holding it?
Yeah, so this is just a product from Citadel.
We can't see. You got to come down.
Yep.
There you go.
Okay. This is just a miniature holder from Games Workshop. I've got so many of these. They're a great little product. I don't know if any other company makes them, but previously it was either I was holding them by the base, which gets messy, or putting sticky tack on the bottom of the base and putting that on like a medicine bottle or something. And this is way better.
That's pretty cool.
I like it way better. All right.
All right, I'm gonna get the focus back on there.
Let's do some browns. I want to do some browns for some of this leather that he's got.
Christy B says, C says, hi, Dad.
Hi, sweetheart. I love you. So we're going to go with the dark umber, I think. We're not going to go all the way.
Tracy's asking, how did you get into painting miniatures?
So it all goes back to I had 10 or 11 years old, I think, and I was in Goodwill costume hunting with my mom, and I found a source book for the Warhammer Fantasy Army, the Lizard Men, and I had no idea what it was. I'd never seen anything like it, but it was a rule book. I didn't know what that meant, but it had all these cool pictures of these little miniatures, and I'd been obsessed with miniatures my whole life. My parents have a really cool tradition where they've bought a Charles Dickens house for the Christmas Village every Christmas that they've been married, so they have a city now at this point. And I always loved that as a kid. I always loved going, here in the South, there's Civil War museums all over the place, and they frequently had, big models of battlefields with all the little tiny miniature soldiers, and I would just sit there and get lost in those. So I saw this source book with these like crazy fantasy looking things and these giant lizard men, and it was like 12 cents at Goodwill. So I got it and then started looking into what Games Workshop was, and I was and am Lord of the Rings obsessed. And in looking into Games Workshop, this was right when the movies were starting to come out, and when they were announcing that Lord of the Rings was starting. Games Workshop was making a Lord of the Rings game, and so that was a pretty quick transition in starting to paint those little models, and so yeah, I've been doing it for a while, and then got back into it again after college, and that's kind of when things really started taking off. When I started playing D&D, and I started playing these miniature war games, and so I went from having a handful of old models from when I was a kid to freaking, I don't even know, an obscene amount of plastic men.
And Santa joined the chat and says, painting miniatures, how exciting.
Howdy, Santa. Ho, ho, ho.
Hydrofla or Hydroflorida, I don't know. Thoughts on how Warhammer, both AOS and 40K, handle orcs?
I love them. I find especially 40K orcs very fun, very amusing. I've always wanted to do a very vehicle-heavy army of space orcs from 40K and paint them normally, paint them greenskin, but then do white paint over that to be like War Boys from Fury Road, and I'd like to do a full conversion on like Gazgul or something to look like Immortan Joe. I thought it would be sick, but again, I don't play the game, so it's kind of further down on the list. That would just purely be a painting hobby project. But yeah, I like them, but I also like the Lord of the Rings orcs, the more dirty, grimy, kind of dark fantasy orcs.
Biddy Buggy and Hydrofla, I think, are friends because they said Biddy and I spent an evening painting landscapes on Space Marines shoulder pads.
Damn.
They make for fun canvases.
Well, that is a level beyond even my little insane tiny details. I tip my hat to you. That's phenomenal. I've seen similar things done, and it's absolutely stunning. Or some of the banners for 40K or Age of Sigmar, some of these armies, they have a big banner, and I've seen people do these just remarkable paint jobs that just make me want to go out and bury my brushes somewhere. And let's see. We'll go ahead and do his gloves.
Huvian Holmes says, I don't know anything about Warhammer, but this stream is making me really happy because it's something my stepdad and siblings love.
Oh, that's awesome. That's wonderful. It's a very fun hobby. I love Dungeons and Dragons very much, and I love the role play aspects of Dungeons and Dragons. But I'm not going to pretend like the combat is not my favorite part. And so these war games are essentially that, but for 45 minutes to 2 or 3 hours. which I absolutely love.
Santa's asking if you use magnification when painting the smaller details.
I don't. It's a perfectly valid way to do it. The only reason that I haven't delved into it is I wear glasses, but my eyes are still okay to see that much detail. And the biggest thing is you have to be aware of with the magnification is it doesn't just magnify the details; it also magnifies your brush, and because it's just a singular lens as opposed to our eyeballs, it will throw off your depth perception.
Yeah, your depth perception. Yeah.
So it's not insurmountable. There's plenty of people that use it, but I haven't honestly wanted to take the time or felt that I needed to take the time to kind of relearn how the distance from my brush to the model works.
Ruth asks, have you ever heard of the board game Legends of Andor?
Legends of Andor.
Is that like a Star Wars?
It sounds very familiar, but I can't say that I am familiar with it. Is it a miniatures board game?
I don't know.
Because I like miniatures board games. I've kickstarted a few. I love Hate was a great one. That was a CMON. The one I'm most excited for upcoming, and we talked about this in the news section of one of our Under Towers episodes a couple weeks ago, is Monolith Games just announced a fully licensed Berserk board game, and I am a massive fan of Berserk.
Berserk was a graphic novel?
Yeah, the manga. Mm-hmm.
Manga, okay.
Yep. And so that's going to be cool.
Lucille Harrington asks, what's the most interesting face either of you have ever painted, drawn, etc.?
I'll show them. I'll show a couple of them again real quick because I know people have joined the chat since we showed them off.
And then Santa's asking, how can we follow Steven? Drop the socials. Now, Steven doesn't have much on social.
I'm on it. I'm on Instagram, and I post things
post
as I paint
miniatures?
them. I do. I haven't in a minute, but I am Citizen Insane is my Instagram handle.
And then you have a YouTube podcast.
Yeah.
That I'm going to be a guest on.
Yes. Yeah. Scott's going to be on our show. That episode should drop.
I'll get
Friday.
the link and I'll post it I'll pin it in the comments when this is done.
But if you look up Under Towers podcast on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts, that's us. These are two of my most interesting faces.
Over to the right and up a little bit.
Boop.
There you go. Thank you.
There we go.
Oh, let me zoom. Let me get the focus a little better. There we go.
These are fun.
Yeah, those are great. All right.
So. All right.
I'm manually focusing everything, so. How many miniatures are you painting? Right now, I think Steve's just doing one.
Yeah, right now, just one.
And there's no way for him to finish it either. This is just for a chance for him to answer some questions and. Oh, you got to move a little left to.
Yeah, that's the sauce part that. Let's go ahead with our next layer. And
Emma's asking, hello, what is the paint that you're using?
I am using Pro Acryl. These are from Monument Hobbies, I think. Not the most beginner-friendly of paints, but I'm really enjoying them. They're very smooth, very matte finish, and they come. I don't know if you can hear that. They come with little ball bearings inside. Yeah. You can buy. Army Painter makes the little ball bearings that you can put inside your paint bottles, which is helpful.
Mix up the paint. Alice asks, what was the one on the right? That was the Darth Maul one.
What was he?
Yeah, what character?
Yeah, I don't remember his name. He had a specific name. That was from a Warhammer Age of Sigmar game called Underworlds. And it was a very small small model count, little skirmish board game. played on hexes instead of using measuring sticks to move people around, and it was it had a card-based element similar to Magic the Gathering, which made it very fun, very enjoyable for a little while. But then also is kind of what killed it for me, because at a certain point with card games, you have to keep buying so many things to stay relevant.
Dennis is asking, do you like The Witcher? Or do you like Witcher?
I love Witcher. Now, which Witcher are we talking? Which Witcher were you talking about?
Which Witcher?
I enjoy some of the show. In our book club for Under Towers, we read the first 2 books, the short story collections. Loved that. And I'm a massive fan of Witcher 3. I'm a PlayStation gamer, so that is currently the only Witcher game that I have played. But I've played it many times, and I love
Santa is asking, are these paints airbrush friendly?
I have not tried putting any of these through an airbrush, but I mean, I think you can, any of these miniature paints from any of the companies that are making miniature paints, you could put through an airbrush. You just would probably have to use some medium to get it thin enough. But a lot of these companies, Vallejo does it, Army Painter does it, Citadel does it. They make versions of a lot of their paints that are specifically for airbrush, that don't require much mixing at all. You probably still want to put a little bit of medium in it just to help the flow.
All right. Okay, we've got a bunch of really good questions, so
Awesome.
Keep them
Fire
quick.
away.
All right. Are basic acrylics all right to use on miniatures?
So here's my thing with art. You can do whatever you want. You can absolutely make anything you want work. The reason that I would advise you against that and steer you towards acrylics that are made specifically for miniature painting is the size of the pigments. If you were to go and buy a tube of acrylic paint at your art supply store and mix it down to the right consistency, you could get the right consistency as far as the flow of the paint goes, but you're probably going to end up covering up some detail because the pigment size itself, the physical size of the pigment, is much bigger than in these paints that are specifically made for painting miniatures.
Okay. Let's see. What is the biggest and smallest minis you've done?
The smallest is definitely this fella. That's 15 millimeter.
That's crazy.
Biggest, I painted some giants. I think there's some pictures of them in various stages on my Instagram from a while back. But some frost giants that I 3D printed. I went on a giant kick where I printed like 5 or 6 giants for some reason. Well, not for some reason. It's because it's freaking cool.
Yeah. All right.
So
Gail
print
asked,
these giant things.
what's the most elaborate single miniature you've ever painted, and have you painted larger figurines? Which I think you just mentioned about the giants.
Yeah.
What's the single most elaborate?
I did a display piece for my dad one Christmas. That was it's not a playable model, but like a paintable statue essentially of William Wallace from Braveheart.
Oh, that's cool.
And I did the full tartan on his kilt.
Wow.
And that probably qualifies as the most intense. I've done tartan before, but because this was a display piece, I was putting a lot more work into it. I want to say real quick before I answer some more questions, because we're starting to get up into kind of highlight territory, if you notice, especially with his face, I'm really kind of sticking mostly towards the upper parts of his face now. So like nose, we're going to hit his cheekbones here. You can see where brow ridges are sculpted. I'm not worrying too much about, keeping some of that shadow in there is great too. But we'll get the finer highlights here in a moment. And then catching his jaw, but staying out of this part of his cheek gives you some nice contrast there, and helps shade the face a little bit, just catching some of those higher points and leaving some of the dimples. And then we're going to do the same thing with the rest of his muscles here. We're going to start staying a little bit
Hitting
more
the peaks
out.
and leaving the valleys.
Exactly. Yeah, we're
All
just
right.
making depth here. We're just creating depth.
Agata Best says, how do you get the minifigs?
You can print them. All the ones that I've shown off today are not 3D prints, but you can definitely. There's some just remarkable dudes on Patreon, and then also selling them on. You can buy the STLs on my Mini Factory, and some other places. Just some remarkable sculptors that are getting their work out there. But all these are retail bought, either directly from the company that makes the game. In this case, for these models, it's Steamforged Games, or various online retailers.
All right, Dennis had a follow-up on the Witcher thing. I meant the books and games, not the TV show. The TV show is blasphemy against The Witcher because these people hate him.
Attaboy. No, I'm with you there. I adore the books. I adore the games. I thought that the main casting for the show was pretty spot on, especially Geralt and Ciri. I felt that they were phenomenal casting. But a lot of the other characters were not, and a lot of the character dynamics they very obviously did not understand or did not care about, like Geralt and Dandelion specifically. They didn't have the freaking courage to call him Dandelion in the show, but also in the show it's like Geralt is annoyed with him all the time and treats him like crap. He's kind of a bully to him, and also, to be fair, he's annoying in the show. Whereas in the books, like, they're best friends. They're absolute best friends. And Geralt loves Dandelion. And they bicker like best friends bicker. But they have each other's backs, unquestioningly. So there's dynamics that they did not get.
All right. Is there a reason why there's a lot of paint on his thumb, or is it by mistake?
It's 100% purposeful. Yeah, some of this is you're catching. Some of that stuff is from not being careful enough while I was priming these models last night. But if you see, I'll show again. With the stuff on my thumb here, I will use my thumb to get some of the excess paint off.
So it doesn't kind of gloop on.
Yeah. So it's so that I have exactly what I need on my brush. And honestly, these acrylics kind of, if you keep them all in the same spot on your thumb, they're just going to dry together and peel right off. So it's not even that big of a mess.
Alice Wilson asks, are Guildhammer and Warhammer in the same universe?
They're not, no. Similar sculpting styles. They're both in that kind of heroic scale, but they are different universes. The Guild Ball universe was its own thing.
Well, they said Guildhammer.
I'm assuming that they meant Guild Ball.
Okay. Is there's so you don't know if there's?
I don't think there's such a thing as Guildhammer.
All right. Santa says
it sounds cool.
Yeah, Santa says I've painted many miniatures, but for scale railroads. These
Awesome.
are much cooler.
Well, hey, I love a good railroad. We took our kids to Disney World this year, and one of my favorite places that I was in the whole parks that I was so excited to show them was the little miniature train set outside of Germany.
Yeah, that is so good.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Logan loved that too.
I love that stuff.
Ruth says, how long does it take to paint each figure?
It varies. I'm not sure how much time we have left today, but a couple hours for if I'm going to go as detailed as I possibly can. If I'm just working on one, a few hours probably.
Yeah, just a heads up, we're about 15 minutes
Okay,
away.
cool.
Let's see. I Need Help Jinx says, do you have anything you hate about painting figures?
Anything that I hate? I don't think so. I mean, there's certain colors that I don't like painting with. That's about the only thing that I can think of.
That's
I
pretty
do.
good if you can't find a single thing you hate about a
Yeah, I
thing. That
mean,
means you're having fun.
that's the
I
main.
can name
That's the
so
main
many
thing.
things I hate about my art and making art.
I mean, I get in slumps where I just don't want to do it. For
Yeah.
sure. Plenty of those. But there's not really any one specific thing that I hate. I hate painting yellow. I hate painting yellow and orange because they are never as opaque as you want them to be, and so it just takes forever. Or you have to be really, really smart in how you underpaint for those.
Watercat's asking, have you ever played any of the Assassin's Creed games?
Oh yeah, yeah. I have not played all of them. I was very serious about it for a long time. Played all of the original ones up through 3 as they were coming out. And then I played Black Flag, and then I kind of dropped off for a while. But Odyssey and Origins were great.
All right.
Let's do some medals.
Watercat asks, have you... Oh, no, sorry. Sayer asks, how do you motivate yourself out of a slump to paint minifigs? Have you ever been in a slump?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, many times. I would say I switch projects to something that is more exciting, or just take a break, play video games, read books. I read a lot of books. To plug the show again, that's what we talk about on Under Towers mostly. But yeah, just do something else, or if it's connected to a certain project that you're working on that's not as exciting for you at the moment, then switch to something else. For me personally, deadlines are also always helpful, and that's not usually a thing, but especially if I'm doing something for a client, or if I'm doing something for an event like a tournament or something, that's always good motivation to get the extra work in.
All right. Zora Emma asks, how long does it take for the minifigs to dry?
It doesn't take that long. With the acrylics, that's one disadvantage about when you're painting. If you paint with oils, it does take a very long time to dry. Like it could take a day or more.
Ruth's asking if you've ever played Zelda. They know it's a lot different from the games that you've been asked about, but they really enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I know that I would enjoy, especially the newer ones. I have not, but only because
I've threatened Steven with giving him my Switch just so he could play through them.
And that's kind of one of those, hey, don't threaten me with a good time. But only because my first console was a Sega Dreamcast. And then I got a PlayStation 2, and I've just been a PlayStation gamer ever since. The games that come out on PlayStation appeal to me the most. But I know for a fact that I would love the new Zelda games. It's literally the only reason that I have not played them is just because I've not owned a system.
Just come up a little bit. There you go.
So we're doing some metallics here. Like I mentioned earlier, but for anybody that wasn't here at the very beginning, when you're painting metallics, you want to make sure to paint them black first, which is one great reason to, especially if you're painting somebody, if I'm painting somebody that is like in a full suit of armor or something, or mostly armor, I'm for sure going to prime them black, because it makes this part of it easier. I don't have to spend as much time going and painting over an entire suit of armor or something in black paint, because I'll just do a good and thorough job of priming it in that color. And technically, if you're interested, what this is called is true metallic metal, and this is just acrylic paint that has little silvery flecks in them to give it a sheen.
Good. All right. Stardust says, do you have any tips for making clothing look weathered? My minis look a little too perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a good transition to let's do some washing. Let's do a little bit of washing. So a quick and easy way to do a little bit of weathering is this liquid talent that I talked about. This is my well-used bottle of Agrax Earthshade. This is a brown wash. This is definitely good for adding some texture because it's gonna run into the shadows. Got to be careful with these. These bottles are notorious for spilling. So you just kind of load up your brush, and can you see me there?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're just gonna paint carefully over this brown, and it's a darker. Even though we painted with a darker shade of brown, this wash is darker still, and it's gonna run into the recesses, but it's also gonna tint that a little bit. And so if you want to get really grimy with it, you could do multiple layers of washing. It stops looking pretty and starts getting kind of grimy. There's also things you could do. I mentioned earlier Games Workshop's technical paints. Let me show you something real quick while this is setting. Well, let's hit this real quick while I still got some on the brush. We're just gonna hit these. There's not really many creases in these armbands, but because again the tint is gonna change, we'll keep it consistent here with all these browns. This guy
To the right. And there you go.
the lore of this faction is that they're from the Eagle clan, the Shiho, and they were conquered and deposed. And this little dude is the last remaining prince. It's kind of a lone wolf and cub situation.
Yeah.
But because they're outlaws and rebels, I wanted them to not look nice and shiny. So I took some of this mud texture that I put on the base, and I got that on their shoes.
Oh, so it actually has a little bit of 3D texture.
It does, and I put a little bit of that on the base of their robes as well.
How'd you get the mud texture?
That's from Vallejo paints.
And it comes with the paint is kind of chunky.
Yeah, it specifically is for basing textures.
Could you just like add sand into it or something?
You
like
could.
That?
You definitely could. There's all sorts of ways you can make texture. You can use glue and baking soda, I've used that like to make asphalt kind of textures. This is another very textureful model. For his armor, we're talking about kind of weathering things. I painted over with, did I bring it? Yeah. Typhus Corrosion. This is a technical paint from Citadel, and it's kind of like a wash, but it's much thicker and it has grit in it. So it's really gritty, dirty, nasty stuff, and it added this texture to his armor plates. And then over the top of that, I dry brushed some of this Riser Rust, which is very dry to begin with, and it really does a great job of catching on a lot of that texture.
Oh, that's great. Can we see it again? Yeah. A little to the right. To the right. There you go.
So you can see a lot of that kind of grimy stuff.
And then did you add like a gloss to the blood?
So the blood, this is one of my favorite things. It's called Blood for the Blood God. It's another technical paint. And essentially it is just a very thick, transparent red that's very glossy.
Yeah.
So it's great. Similarly, down here, there's I cannot remember what this one's called, but it's essentially the same thing as Blood for the Blood God, but with this really nasty green.
Yeah.
So you can do stuff like that. You can also, if you really want to weather, one thing I didn't talk about when we're thinking about layering our paints and mixing paints, you can always lighten a paint by adding white. You can always darken a paint by adding black, but one thing that you have to be aware of going into that is that it will desaturate the color.
Yeah.
However, if what you're wanting is a more weathered look, say you have like a blue jacket or something on a miniature and you wanted a more weathered look, you could take a white and very judiciously start adding that in, and that natural desaturation could add a weathered look, like the sun
it's got
is
too much sun, yeah.
bleaching the color away. But I like adding textures to things, any of those grits, any of that. It's a great question.
Zora asks, how many minifigures have you painted?
A lot. Not enough. I've got way too much gray plastic at my house. But I have painted a lot, and I've had the good fortune to be able to paint a lot of miniatures for friends, and so a lot of the ones that I've painted aren't even with me anymore. But yeah, I've painted a lot. It's great fun. Let's do another. This is
Dennis says this stream looks like a scene of fixing Woody from Toy Story 2.
Nice. I remember watching that and feeling like, oh my God, that's so satisfying.
Come down just a little bit.
So we're going to start doing some finer highlights here. We've switched to a smaller brush. And for this round, we're just going to start catching our highest ridges here. Chrome dome up here. Everything is a ridge on top of this gentleman's head. All right, we'll do the mustache here in a second too. So thoughts on brown versus black mustache?
Brown.
To the chat.
Or blue.
Blue. We're not doing blue. I still have to take this miniature home.
All right, so we've got brown, brown, black, black, brown, brown, brown.
All right, so it sounds like the Browns have it. So we'll do it. We'll do a brown stash.
Jaluwalu asks, do you still have the first miniatures you've painted?
I do.
If you do, are you planning to show them?
I don't have them with me, but I could probably dig those up and post some pictures on my Instagram. I may actually
It'd be
have.
Cool to do your first and your most recent, like
Yeah.
your first and your last, kind of do a side by side.
Yeah, it is a vast difference. We'll say that. But yeah, it's a high elf from Fellowship of the Ring, from the opening battle. It was the very first miniature I ever painted.
Dragonfruit says this live reminds me of the guild painting. It kind of does.
Yeah, and there's some fun things that we're working on with Scott for that. But definitely, I mean, one of the first miniatures that got me kind of really back into painting was my first D&D character, who was obviously a barbarian. Big old axe.
Yeah.
Had to.
All right, let me see if I find some more questions.
Yeah, fire away. We got a few more minutes here.
Well, I keep getting the same question, of course, because
sure.
new people, which is, where do you get the miniatures?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, online is the best place. I mean, unless if you have a game store nearby, you for sure will be able to get Games Workshop stuff there. It is questionable. It kind of just depends on what games are being played in your area, as far as what other things are going to be readily available in person.
Book Lover says, good to see I'm not the only one who paints more of themselves than they do the canvas.
Yeah, hey, you're not a true miniature painter if your thumb is clean. You're not working hard enough.
Rennie says, barbarians are fun. I need to play one sometimes. Too bad I'm the forever DM.
I love them. The joke is I always end up playing a barbarian. Even the one time that my friend convinced me to play a mage, I played a who was I? I was a sorcerer, and I still ended up playing. Especially once I got up to level 5 and had fireball, I was just a barbarian sorcerer. I was just you better not stand in front of my guy because Everything is getting fireballed. All right. The time has come, the walrus said. We're going to go for it. Live in front of however many people, we're going to try to dot these I's.
All right, down a little bit so we can see.
All right. So I'm going to just pick. This is easy, picking where he's looking because he's obviously charging, so he's looking straight forward, and we're just going to very carefully add a little bit of black in there. And then trying to match it over here. This is one of those rare occasions. I'm nearsighted, so I actually end up looking over my glasses more than through them for these. That's not right. This angle is weird. Let me see. That looks good. I like that. I like that. That's good. Okay.
We're just seeing your thumbs. I'm sorry.
It's a.
There we go.
Moment of truth. It's not bad.
All right, lower it so we can see.
I don't even know how much you can see it.
Oh, you got to look at the...
Oh, I see.
There we go. That's good.
So let's give him... let's paint his mustache real quick, and then I'm going to show you another cool little easy thing that you can do to increase the detail. Let's do a different shade of brown.
And we have reached the 90-minute mark, so...
All right. Last couple of things here to make his face pop.
Ruth asks, how do you get to work around artist shakes? I have a huge problem with that.
I sympathize with you. I used to, for whatever reason, at the end of high school, I got sick with something. I don't know what it was, and I had the shakes like crazy. My hands are pretty darn steady anymore, but the way that I get around it, if I feel them start coming on, is I brace myself really well. It's like right now I'm leaning full on Scott's table, and I've got my forearms on the table, and this is how I paint at home too. Forearms are on the table, and then I'm bracing the model against my hands, and I'm bracing my painting hand too, so that really I'm only moving like this much. So it's just finding as many of those brace points as you can.
I'm looking at all of the things on the floor too that are going to
Yeah.
Wow.
This is a great little base.
Is that sausage links?
Yep. Yeah, this is themed specifically for the Butcher's Guild. So there's sausage links, there's some hams, some butcher knives. All right. So I would probably take his skin one more layer of highlights. I'd do a layer of highlights. We've got a lot of work on other places in the model, but I'm pretty happy with where he is. I want to show you guys one little technique.
I feel he needs chest hair.
I think he would. Yeah, yeah, that would be a phenomenal detail. But speaking of little hair details that we can add, I'm going to take a blue ink wash. I'm going to put some of that down on my palette. What would be best to use with this would be an ink medium or like a wash medium, but water will do just fine. I'm going to just water this down like crazy. This is going to be very, very watery because I don't want it to actually be blue. But Boar strikes me as a fellow that probably is not always completely clean shaven.
Oh, good. You're going to add a little bit of blue.
So we're gonna give him a little bit
5
of
o'clock shadow.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that's nice.
So let's see what brush is going to be best for this. Probably this too. So we're just going to get some on the brush. Can you see his face there?
Yeah, that's good.
Going to dab off a little bit of the excess. And then we're just going to kind of trace a beard outline here. And again, we're going to keep it light and we'll add more as we need. And come over here on his chin. Not going to get his lip, but just a little bit on his chin.
That's a nice touch.
It's a really nice, subtle touch that adds a lot, and this is so simple. There's nothing complicated about this, but it's just a little thing that is going to make the miniature pop. And again, we're adding character. We're telling a story here with our painting. We're finding out a little bit more of who this guy is. And honestly, I like that. I think that's a good amount.
Yeah, that looks great.
I think he's been bald long enough that he's not going to have it on top of his head. I'm not going to try to paint a hairline like that. But just that little detail adds a lot. Another thing you can do similarly for kind of gruff looking men is I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to take a red this time, water it down, and same thing, just a little bit on the brush, pat it off, and then I'm going to hit his nose. He's kind of berserking out a little bit.
Yeah.
So his
I love the red noses.
His face is getting a little flushed. So we're going to hit that a little bit.
That looks great.
So, is there? I don't know if anybody's still watching.
Oh no, you got a lot of people still here, but it's just. Yeah, I think you've answered all of the questions, and everybody's just kind of enjoying it.
Yeah, the only other thing I would want to show, I mean, I'll stick around as long as anybody wants, and as long as you want, Scott. But the only other thing I wanted to touch on, as far as we've done layering, that's especially what we're doing with the skin. That's layering, and it's literally just going on in various layers of paint. We did washes. You can see a little bit. It's very subtle, which is what I like. And then I would probably, on these leather gauntlets and everything, I would start layering on top of that, but trying to keep a lot of that shade that we put on with the washing. The only other thing is dry brushing, and that's literally just taking a crappy old brush that you have and literally just hitting it like that with a very minimal amount of paint on your brush.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic.
So yeah, there's some miniature painting. That's what we got done today. I feel good about that.
That was fun. That was fun. Good. And I will post Steven's Instagram and his YouTube channel in the comments. And, if you like science fiction and fantasy, come check us out at Under Towers. And Scott's going to be joining us. That episode should go live next Friday. Yeah. And then we will... Don and I will see you here on Monday for our regular live, and we hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and thanks for hanging out with me and Steven today. Yeah, thanks everybody. This was a blast. Bye.